No one knows the day or the hour that I will return, said Jesus in Matthew chapter 24, verse 36. For most Christians, the question is not, will Jesus come back, but when will Jesus come back? And so, with inquisitive, inquiring minds, we want to know when Jesus will come back. But one of the most important lessons we can take from our study of the future, from Jesus' own lips in Matthew 23, 24, and 25, is that Jesus says you cannot, you will not, you won't know the day or the hour. It seems though that each generation has been tempted with and fallen prey to the temptation to try and set a day or an hour, even from the Bible. The Adventist movement started with a false prophecy of Jesus' return in 1844. The Jehovah's Witness movement started with a false prophecy of Jesus' return in 1914 and 1925. In the past generation, the late great planet Earth popularized the theory that we looked at last week, that the establishment of the secular nation of Israel in 1948 started God's prophetic time clock. And 40 years later, 1988, would certainly bring the end of time, because we could know, if not the day or the hour, we could know maybe the year. One particular false prophet named Edgar Wisnant put out a book in 1987 called 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Could Be in 1988. Then he got a little bit more sure of himself and put out a second edition called 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Be in 1988. Of course, 1988 came and went, no surprise to us with hindsight, but then he changed the date by 1 to 1989. Why Jesus will come in 1989, he did not then. Then the false prophet Harold Camping, president of Family Radio, put out a book called 1994, question mark, but he was suggesting that he knew the Bible said, and then later on changed it to 2000 and 2005. Why do we continue to get people's hopes up only to make ourselves look foolish? Jesus told us no one knows the day or the hour. And he wants us to know that if anybody comes along telling us they know when Jesus is coming back, that we ought to dismiss them right away, because he will come when we think not. And so if someone predicts that it'll be a year, certainly it won't be that year. Let's look at this verse, Matthew 24, verse 36. Of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be. We are told that nobody knows when the Son of Man will come. But I want you to notice here a very important transition. The word that, but of that day. You see, up until this point, Jesus has been talking about this day, the first century, soon, in the very close future. He said in Matthew 23:36, assuredly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation, the people living right now. And so all the things between the parentheses of Matthew 23:36 and Matthew 24:34, all are supposed to take place in that generation. The wars and rumors of wars, and the tribulation and the desolation, and the Son of Man coming. In verse 31, we talked about Jesus coming to heaven, not coming to earth. But at the end of this passage, that were supposed to take place in the first century, all these things will take in this generation. He closes it out with our study last week. When you see these things, know when you see them, it's near, not far, not distant. At the doors, assuredly I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. Everything between Matthew 23:36 and Matthew 24:34. But then we shift dramatically in Matthew 24, verse 36, because he says, but of that day and hour no one knows. So he's talking about something different. This is the near demonstrative. That is the far demonstrative. When I say, I want this book, not that one, I mean this book here, not that one over there. If I go over there, that book becomes this book. and this book becomes that book, because this means near, that means far. So Jesus is making a very visible, very special shift that we have to follow him. There is a difference between this day and that day. What is that day? Well, remember that they asked a very specific question in the beginning of Matthew 24, verse 3. As Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be?" They said, "Jesus, look at the temple." He said, "Not one stone will be left upon another. It's all going to be destroyed." So they're troubled, and they ask, "When will these things be?" The destruction of the temple. "And what will be the sign of your coming?" They're not asking about a second coming, most likely. They didn't even think he was leaving. "And the end of the age." So now, Jesus has spent all of these verses telling them these things, the destruction of the temple. His coming in destruction on Jerusalem would be in that generation. But the end of the age, well, the end of the Old Testament age would come in 70 AD with the destruction of the temple. And now there's a new age. But if they're asking about the end of the world, which they may have conflated with all of this destruction, Jesus now shifts from this day, the things that you will see, until that day, it's not necessarily going to be the same thing. This versus that. You see, in Matthew 24:34, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. But now, just a verse later, but of that day and hour, no one knows. You don't know if it's in this generation or some future generation, not of the angels, but my Father only. So notice the great big divide between this and that. This is not that. They're not identical. This one is different from that one, and there are a lot of differences. For instance, this generation will be seeing things that will take place very soon and with very clear signs. This generation, they asked about the sign of your coming. And so he gives them some signs: wars and rumors of wars, tribulation, false prophets will deceive many. Matthew 24:6, this gospel preached in all the world, 24:14. The abomination of desolation in 24:15. You'll see all these things. And then verse 30 talks about the sign of the Son of Man will appear. Not the sign will appear in heaven, but the sign that Jesus is in heaven will appear. The abomination of desolation and destruction of Jerusalem. And he says, you will see all these things near at the very door. This generation is to see some things that will take place in their day, things that will be soon, things that are pointed to with signs. But now as he shifts to that day, he's going to be talking over and over again, no signs, no way to know. Of that day, no one knows, verse 36. They did not know until the flood came in the days of Noah and took them away. No signs. In verse 42, you do not know what hour the Lord is coming. You won't have a sign to tell you. And in verses 43 and 44, they didn't know what hour the thief would come, the Son of Man coming at an hour when you do not expect him. There will be no signs. And that's the way we see it in the New Testament. Jesus gives the illustration, the parable of the master, the servant, the wicked servant. When he thought that his master wouldn't come, he's not looking for him, and the master will come at an hour he is not aware of. Jesus is giving a picture illustrating his second coming, and it's not when you think. And Paul uses this in 1 Thessalonians 4, 1 through 3. The day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. Jesus talks about coming as a thief. Or he says later on in chapter 25, watch, for you know neither the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming. Well, then these would say, well, we don't know the day or hour, but maybe we know the year. They certainly have missed the point that Jesus is making. You don't know. There aren't signs. And we don't, it's not saying that we don't need signs. He's saying that there aren't any. But when we look at this day, it's things that will take place soon. So this generation, he says, all these things will take place in this generation, chapter 23. You will see all these things. No, it is near at the very door. Again, near, verse 33. This generation will see all these things, verse 34. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. They will deliver you up to tribulation, verses 6 through 9. You will see the abomination of desolation in verse 15. All of these things are soon in this generation. It may be 40 years, but that's pretty soon, historically speaking. But on the other hand, when we talk about that day, Jesus shifts and he changes and he starts talking about not soon, but delay. He starts to tell stories, 3 stories, and the same theme in all 3 stories, delay. The master is delaying his coming, so the evil steward just puts his feet up and says, I don't have to do anything. The next parable is in chapter 25. It's the 10 bridesmaids, and the bridegroom was delayed, and so they ran out of oil. You remember, the problem was, just like in this one, the bridegroom was delayed, and so they were caught napping. And then he tells a third one, the one that's most familiar to us, the 3 stewards, one who buried his treasure. But the same thing crops up. After a long time, the Lord of these servants came and demanded a reckoning. He said, well done to 2. And he said, you wicked, lazy, slothful servant. The difference is all 3 of them, Jesus is pointing to delay. This is a recurring theme. It's unmistakable in the 3. Why? Jesus is saying, that day, you're going to think, where's Jesus? But Jesus is forewarning them. You're going to see certain things in your lifetime. Certain things are going to take place after your lifetime. There will be a delay. He wants us to know there's a difference between this generation, all these things, near demonstrative, and that day, those things which will be after your demise. There's also a difference in what we're supposed to do. In this generation, you're told to flee. Let those who are in Judea, when you see the abomination of desolation, verse 15, run for the hills. You have a sign, obey the sign, get out of town, because this town is doomed. It's going to be destroyed. Flee to the mountains. And so they have something to do. But in that day, there is no time to flee. 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken, the other left. 2 women grinding at the mill, one will be taken, the other left. There's no signs, there's no ability to flee, not from this taking. So there's a big difference between this and that. And another difference is one is very local and one is very universal. Let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. This is not something in North America. It's not something in Asia. It's something in the ancient Near East. Those who are in Judea should flee to the mountains. What if you live in Kansas and there are no mountains? But of that day, it's not local. All the nations will be gathered to him, Matthew 25:32. After this shift from this to that, it moves from local to universal. And so there is a big difference. And I want you to see the difference between this 2. There is a shift, a transition in emphasis and in the vocabulary that is used. I want you to go back one last time to that day. And I want you to know that that day is a technical term in the New Testament for Jesus' second coming. Over and over again, when Jesus talks about that day, he's talking about the same phenomena, his second coming, the second advent. Jesus says in Matthew 7:22, many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied? Didn't we do this and didn't we do that? And he says, depart from me, I never knew you. That day, he's referring to the end of time, the second coming. Matthew 26:29, Jesus, in drinking the cup with his disciples, said, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine from now until that day. When is that? When we see him again in glory. Luke 10:12, it will be more tolerable in that day for Sodom than for that city. When is that? The day of reckoning at the end of history. More uses of that day. 1 Thessalonians 5:4, you are not in darkness so that this day, he's talking about the day that he's talking about. So it's that day in the future, but this day that I'm talking about, his second coming, it will not overtake you as a thief. When he comes in that day, 2 Thessalonians 1:10, to bring judgment. That day will not come unless the falling away comes first, 2 Thessalonians 2:3. Remember that famous verse in Timothy where Paul says, I know what I have committed unto him until that day. I am persuaded that he's able to keep that which I've committed to him against that day. He says in 2 Timothy 1:18, may find mercy in that day. You want mercy in that day, trust Christ. And he says at the end of 2 Timothy, Paul's last chapter, I know there's a crown laid up for me that he will give me on that day. When is that day? It's in the future. It's distant. I don't know how far. But notice this particular technical term, that day is a way that the New Testament, Jesus refers to his second coming. So I want you to see that we are not to confuse these two things. There's a big difference between what we've seen before in Matthew 24, this generation, now, soon, and now there's a huge shift to that day and delay, and you don't know, and it will probably not be this generation. So let's go on from there, that day and hour to no one knows. Here's the point. Nobody knows. I can't say this clearly enough because Christians keep on getting fooled by false prophets who say, I know everyone else got it wrong, but I know when Jesus is coming back. He says, no one knows. Notice that he says, strangely enough to us, no one knows, not even the angels. Okay, we can handle that. But my Father only. Wait a minute, Jesus, you mean you don't even know? In Matthew, we're not sure. But in Mark, the parallel passage, look at the way Mark records it. Of that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Now, how is this theologically possible? Jesus is God. Jesus is the second person of the Trinity and shares God's attributes, including omniscience. Jesus knows everything, right? Throughout the Gospels, there are times when Jesus asks questions, and we might say, well, he's asking them for their sake, not for his. He already knows. He certainly has access to information that couldn't be humanly known. Jesus has the ability to have omniscience, but we learn that when he was a child, he had to learn like other children. He grew in wisdom. He had to learn his alphabet. He had to learn how to speak and how to walk, just like a human being. He asked people their names. He asked, who touched me, when a woman touched the hem of his garment. Jesus limited his knowledge as a human being so that he had access to it if he needed it, if he wanted it, if he asked for it. But some things he had to ask for. And he did not know the time was come, at least at this time when he was on earth. Jesus tells us as much. Why? I don't know. Maybe you know. But I don't know because I'm not omniscient. Now notice, no one knows. And he tells us the comparison is the days of Noah. As the days of Noah were, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. And so often, this is used to describe, well, we know Jesus is coming in our day because it's just like the days of Noah. It's as bad as it was then, and people were drinking and cursing and doing. But I want you to see when it says, as the days of Noah were, does that mean upheaval and turmoil? It was terrible before Noah's ark. I want you to see that that's not the point that Jesus is making here. What were the days of Noah like? Well, look what Jesus says. As in the days of Noah, so will the Son of Man's coming be. For in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be. And so we have this picture of evil that's overwhelming, upheaval, turmoil, social unrest. No, actually, Jesus is describing everyday life. They're eating and drinking. Is there anything wrong with eating and drinking? We all do it every day. Marrying, giving in marriage. We think, oh, that's terrible. No. Marrying is what men did. Giving in marriage is what women did. But the point is they were going about their everyday lives. They were getting married, having babies, raising children, going to work. And Jesus' point is it was everyday common life. No signs. And so he's talking here about that future time when there are no signs. And the point here is not even evil things, just normal routine, no signs, no forewarning. The only warning they had, actually, if you look at it closely, until the day Noah entered into the ark. You saw Noah building an ark. Yeah, what's that? That was there for years. But then all of a sudden Noah got inside, and the only clue they had something was going to happen is Noah's finished his boat, and now he's gotten inside. To me, this might be a picture of the church. The only sign that people have out there that all of this normal routine will one day end is us inside the ark of the church, praying to God who one day will end history when Jesus does return. The only sign might be right under our noses, just like it was under their noses all the time. Now I want you to notice what happened and that day when Noah entered the ark. They didn't know until the flood came and took them all away, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. There is something very important in this phrase that, again, I think is misinterpreted and missed when reading these passages. The flood came and took them away. Is this a picture of the rapture? No, this is a picture of death and destruction, right? The flood came and took away their lives. This is not a positive thing, right? This is a negative thing. And so we see in parallel passages, like in 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 2 and 3, you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord comes as a thief in the night. How does a thief come in the night? Unexpected, right? Never sends a note saying, hey, I'll be there tomorrow night at 2 in the morning. No, then you wouldn't allow them to break in. A thief comes unannounced and interrupts what is normal everyday life. When they say peace and safety, nothing bad is happening, like in the days of Noah, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman. Painful, but sometimes unexpected. You kind of know something's coming because she's pregnant, 9 months pregnant. But he says, they shall not escape. This is a picture of judgment, correct? I think that's what we miss here in this passage as well. Peter says, 2 Peter 3:3, knowing this first, that scoffers will come in the last days, walking according to their own lusts, and saying, where's the promise of his coming? He promised 2,000 years ago he's coming again. Obviously, he's forgotten about it. He was wrong. Where's the promise of his coming? Since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. We're still getting married. We're still eating and drinking and having babies and raising children and going to work. Jesus just blew it. He got it wrong. But no, he says, like the days of Noah, when they think peace and safety, that's when I will come. You don't know when that is. But here I want to focus on the word took. He says in verse 39, did not know till the flood came and took them. And the very next verses 40 and 41, he says, then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and the other left. If you've ever heard these verses preached on, I'm sure you've heard it preached on as a passage about the rapture when Jesus comes and he takes us all to heaven. Friends, that can't be the interpretation of these verses. In the very context, taking is taking someone away in judgment. So we say, 2 men walking up a hill, one's taken and one's left standing still. I wish we'd all been ready. Oh, I wish I were taken. No, this is not a taken you would wish upon yourself, because they will be taken for what? They will be taken for judgment. We can see that the way this is used in the Bible. In Luke 17, the parallel passage has got a little bit more detail. I tell you, in that night there will be 2 men in one bed. That sounds like today. The one will be taken and the other will be left. 2 women will be grinding together. Who are the ones who are taken? Are they taken in the rapture to heaven, or are they taken in judgment like in the days of the flood? Well, we see hints when Jesus gives us this parable of the wheats and the tares. They're asking, there's weeds out there in the field, tares. Do you want us to go out there and you want us to cut them down? He says, no, both grow together until the harvest. What's the harvest? Second coming, right? And at the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, first gather together the tares. What's first? What's taken first? The tares. Bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat second into the barn. What's taken first? The evil, that which is burned. And so it's pretty clear here, the one that is taken is the evil, and you don't want to be the one who's taken, you want to be the one who's left behind. So no one knows. So he reminds us a second time, watch therefore, you do not know. Earlier in verse 36, no one knows. When God says something, we better take notice. But when he says it twice, we better listen carefully. So now he gives us a second time. You do not know. You cannot know. And if you think you know, you do not know what hour the Lord is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Here's an almost hilarious picture. If you knew what time the burglars were coming, like Kevin in Home Alone, he hears the burglar saying, well, come back tonight about 9 o'clock. And so he's ready for him, right? Here's that picture. If you knew what time the thief was coming, you'd be sitting there, you'd call the police, you'd have a gun, you'd have the doors locked, you'd do something. He says, be ready, because you do not know, a third time, what hour the Son is coming. You do not know, and he uses here the picture of a thief. If the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched. Jesus here is telling us, watch. You don't know, so watch. If you know, you don't have to watch until the time comes, right? In Luke 12:39, a different context, Luke tells us, know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, different context, not in this prophetic version, but he gives the exact same words. Notice, word for word, Matthew 24:43, Luke 12:39. If he known when the thief was coming, the thief wouldn't have gotten away with it, right? He wouldn't have allowed his house to be broken into. Don't let it catch you by surprise is Jesus' point. You do not know. And notice this thief imagery that Jesus gives us is now used throughout the New Testament. Paul quotes it in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. You yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. How do you know? Because Jesus said it in the red letters. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, verse 4, so that this day should be overtaking you as a thief. You don't know when he's coming, but you're going to be ready all the time. It's bad news for those who will be taken in the judgment, but it's good news for you. And so you won't be taken by surprise because you know nobody knows the day or hour, so I'm just going to be ready all the time. The same point is made in Peter, 2 Peter 3:10. The day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, Jesus told us himself, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, the elements will melt with fervent heat, both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. Oftentimes, the thief in the night is used as a picture for the secret rapture when Jesus will come and take his saints away and nobody will notice. And where did they all go? No. Actually, the thief in the night points to the second coming with this loud, this is one of the loudest verses in the Bible. The thief comes unexpectedly, but it doesn't say he comes quietly. It doesn't say that he comes secretly. He just comes unexpectedly. That's the point of the thief imagery. This is the heavens passing away and the elements melting with a fervent heat. This is not picturing a secret rapture, but is picturing an unexpected judgment coming upon the earth. It's also used that way twice in Revelation. In Revelation 3:3, Jesus says in the red letters, remember therefore how you have received and heard, hold fast and repent. Therefore, if you will not watch, I will come upon you as a thief. To this church, he says, if you're not paying attention, I will come in judgment against you, and you will not know what hour I will come upon you. The point of the thief imagery is not secret, but it is unexpected. One more time, right around the time of Armageddon, Revelation 16, behold, I am coming as a thief. Blessed is he who watches and keeps his garments, lest he walk naked, and they see his shame. Here we see not just that it's any time, it could be any moment, but the point is it will always be unexpected, and whenever he comes, it will be a surprise. It's a familiar image, goes on and on and on, just to say it will be unexpected. So he finally, a third time, gives us a summary statement. He's already said, nobody knows but the Father. You do not know, but then he closes up this section. Therefore, on the basis of all this, you also be ready for a third time. When Jesus repeats himself 3 times, we better sit up and take notice. The Son of Man is coming. Not period. He is coming. But he's coming at an hour you do not expect. I don't know when Jesus is coming. I don't pretend to know what century, let alone what year, let alone what day or hour. I think if we knew when Jesus was coming, it would cause us to be lazy when it was far away, and would cause us to work frantically in a frenzy when we thought it was near. You see, it's actually good for us to not know the future, because that way we can live in the present without laziness or frenzy, depending upon our mistaken notion of the end of time. We do not know. And the point is, nobody can know, nobody should know. There is a man in the Old Testament who knew how much time he had to live. He was dying, and he asked to be spared, and God gave him time. And he said 14 years. And so you know what he did with it? For 14 years, he sat around and said, I got all the time in the world. And he didn't do anything. But then at the last minute, it was kind of too late. It's not good for us to know the future, either our own time of death or to know the future. That's why God doesn't reveal the future to us. We can't handle knowing the future. He doesn't want us to be obsessed with the timing of the second coming. He wants us to be busy serving the Lord. We don't know when the Lord is coming, so we don't stand up on the hill looking up at the sky saying, come now, Jesus, come now. Now. He wants us to be down in the valley. He wants us to be in the city. He wants us to be working and serving. He wants our service to be natural and spontaneous, and it wants it to be orderly. We do not know. And the point is, no one can know, no one should know, and if anyone comes along saying they do know, then you just take that book, you throw it in the trash, you disregard them, and you get to work as if Jesus could come today, but he may not come for 10,000 years, because Jesus said no one knows. Next week, we continue our study with 3 studies on delay. Jesus' second coming will be delayed. Thank you for joining us.